So a lot of you have asked me whether the DZO Pictor Zooms work on full frame cameras. And even though I made already 2 videos where I showed you behind the scenes where I use these lenses with the Zcam E2-F6, which is a full frame cameras, nobody seemed to believe me that these lenses actually cover full frame sensor too. And that's mainly because DZO markets these lenses as a Super 35 lens set. Today, I want to prove you that these lenses, even though they are marketed as Super 35, they actually work really good on full frame. So I have 3 different cameras right here, the Sony Fx6, the Panasonic S1, and the Zcam E2-F6, and we're gonna do a test where I'm gonna show you how good these lenses fit on full frame. Of course, there will be a little bit of vignetting, which is pretty obvious, but that vignetting is gonna be way smaller than you think. So let me show you how it goes. I'm gonna firstly start with the 20-55 and I'm gonna put it on the Zcam E2-F6. I'm gonna go from the widest zoom range to the tightest zoom range, and I'm gonna shoot everything at t2.8 because this is how I normally shoot with these lenses. And then I'm gonna go to the next cameras and see exactly how they compare and how good they fit on their sensor. So let's begin. One thing that I like about these lenses is that they are not that heavy, but on the Zcam E2-F6 we have this active EF lock which holds the lens really good in place. So we're not gonna use lens support on this test, but usually I suggest you use it, even though these lenses are not that heavy. So, okay guys, so now we are on 20mm and we are the widest on this lens. We are at t2.8, and as you can see, these lenses are marketed as Super 35 and they cover full frame extremely good, considering the fact that we are now at 20mm. Of course, if we go down to 25, the vignetting is almost disappearing. And if we go to 30, the vignetting starts to get less and less visible. One thing that I really love about this lens is that, for example, as soon as we go to 40, 45, 50, and even 55, we can clearly see how good the image looks. And one thing that I really love about it is the fact that it has something special to the image, something that you don't see with conventional lenses every day. And because this lens is made for Super 35, when you put it on a full frame sensor, it tends to look different than lenses that are made for full frame sensor. And as I go again wide, you can clearly see some distortion on the edges, something like an effect that I would put on the image to make my image look more vintage. And I really like the fact that these lenses make that straight out of the lens. Now, let's say you want to shoot at T4. Now, when you go at T4, the vignetting starts to be way more noticeable. And as you close down the aperture, the vignetting starts to be more and more visible. And to be honest, if you get these lenses, you can easily shoot at t2.8 because this is where these lenses look the best, and I think they are also very sharp and they are also parfocal. So if I zoom out and zoom in, our subject will remain in focus. This is something very important when you're using zoom lenses, and I think this is really impressive. Now let's move to the next camera. We're gonna put the 20mm on the Sony Fx6 and then on the Panasonic S1. Now on the Fx6 we can see the vignetting a little bit more, and I don't know why, because on paper the Zcam E2-F6 has a bigger sensor than the Sony Fx6. So this is a little bit weird, but we're gonna go through it. And we're gonna go now to 25mm, which the vignetting almost disappears. 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, and 55. So as you can see, at 55 there is no visible vignetting, but overall I love how the image looks with the Fx6 also. I think it also has that vintage look at wide, and as soon as we go a little bit tighter, we tend to have a more cleaner image. And to me, honestly, this is a very nice thing because I like lenses that give you something different than conventional lenses. So again, parafocal works really good. And let's see now what happens when I closed out the aperture. So this is T4, T5.6, 8, 11, and 22. So obviously as we close down the aperture, the vignetting will be more and more visible, but at T2.8, I think it's really usable. With just a little bit of zoom, you can get away with that. And now let's see what happens when I zoom in and close down the aperture. A little bit of vignetting too, but not that bad. Moving on to the next camera. So we are now on the Panasonic S1, and as you can see, the vignetting looks pretty similar with the others, meaning that the sensor is full frame and it's similar in size. We're gonna go now through the zoom range and see exactly how it looks. We're gonna go from 20 to 25, and the vignetting is almost gone. It looks really good. At 30, the vignetting is way and way less visible. 35, 40, 45, 50, and 55. And what I can see with this camera is that the lens on this camera tends to be a little bit softer than the others, mainly because we're shooting maybe vlog, and on vlog is the profile picture has less sharpness. I don't know, who knows. But overall, the zoom range, vignetting, and how it covers this sensor is pretty similar with the others. We're gonna go now on the aperture and lower down the aperture and see exactly how it looks. At 5.6, the vignetting is really visible. At 8, it's way and way visible. So overall, I think it covers the same as the other cameras, and I think it looks pretty good. The only thing that you can do is maybe zoom in into the image a little bit and you can get away with it. But for a Super 35 lens that it's not supposed to cover full frame, it covers full frame really good. So we are continuing this test on the Panasonic S1 with the 50 to 125. We are at T2.8, 50 millimeters, and as you can see, the vignetting is pretty big. I mean, it could be bigger. I tested lenses that are designed for Super 35 cameras that have way more vignetting than this one, but so far, with a little bit of zooming in, we can get away with it. The only problem is that compared to the other lens that we tested is that the other one has actually, when we go towards a tighter zoom range, the vignetting tends to disappear. And with this one, it's kind of present towards the way. Let me show you. We're gonna go to 60 millimeters, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, 120, 125. So at 125, the vignetting is less visible than at 50, but it is still there. You still need to zoom in a little bit compared to the other lens where you can get away with it without zooming in on the image. But so far, I think it looks pretty good. I really like the image. I think it has really awesome characteristics. And that vignetting is not bothering me at all. I can just zoom in a little bit. Now let's see how it looks when I stop down the aperture. I'm gonna go to f4, f8, and f12. So towards the range, it doesn't go, the vignetting, it doesn't crop into the image. So if you want to shoot at f4, you can do it without having to zoom in into the image more. Now let's go to the other camera and see how it performs on the FX6. We are on the Sony FX6 right now. We are at 50 millimeters at t2.8, and the vignetting is way bigger than on the Panasonic, but you can get away with a little bit of zoom. So let's begin. I'm at t2.8 like I said, and I'm at 50, and now I'm gonna go to 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, 125. And one thing that I'm realizing with this camera is that these lenses are a little bit sharper than with the Panasonic, and I think that's mainly due to the fact that maybe Vlog and S-Log3 work a little bit different, but I'm still getting the same nice vibe that I like, and the image looks really interesting. It looks different. You kind of want to have something different in your lens package that looks nice, and if you want to use these lenses like normal lenses, you can just put the camera on Super 35 and you're not going to have these chromatic aberrations and distortions and vignetting. So you can have both from both worlds. Doing this again. So vignetting is present towards the zoom range and gets a little bit way less visible when we are at 125. We are now on the Zcam E2-F6, and as you can see, the image looks pretty similar. I mean, the vignetting looks pretty similar with the other cameras, and to be honest, I think that the best looking image out of these lenses is paired with this camera. I don't know why, it has something special. And we're gonna go through the zoom range and see exactly how it looks. We are at 50 t2.8. We're gonna go to 60, 70, 80, 95, 105, 120, and 125. So with this camera, I think the vignetting is less and less visible towards the end of the zoom range, and I really think it looks really good. I mean, paired with the 6K image, I think it has the most beautiful balance from the cameras that we tested, and I think the vignetting is the least visible from the other cameras. Looks really good. I like it. Let's do an aperture test where I'm gonna go to T4, T8. So it's totally usable even if you drop down the aperture. And let's do the dropping down the aperture at a higher. We are at 90 right now. I'm gonna go. So yeah, I think it looks pretty good. So let's be honest, you're not gonna film walls every day, anytime. You're probably gonna use these lenses outdoors where a vignetting will be much better covered up by the nature or by different shadows. And to be honest, we tested this into a controlled environment where you can see the vignetting, but I'm gonna play now some footage that you can see the vignetting is not that visible, and you can get away even with less zooming in on the image. So therefore, I think that these lenses are great even for full frame, and I'm really happy I invested in them because I see them as a long-term investment, because Super 35 cameras are not dead. There are still a lot of good Super 35 cameras out there, like the Pocket 6K or the Sony FS7 or the Red cameras or the Arri Alexas and all that. So having lenses that work on both worlds, full frame and Super 35, is really great. And I hope this video helps you decide if these lenses are for you or not. And With all this being said, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to this YouTube channel and follow me on Instagram, and also leave me a comment down below on what you thought about this video and what kind of content you want to see from me on the future, or maybe what lenses you want me to test on the future. And until next time, make sure to have some fun, create some epic content, and be safe out there. Cheers!